It's Andy Ewins from FormaServe once again. In this short How To on IBM My video set, we'll be taking a look at how we can get news feeds from the BBC into our RPG using embedded SQL. We'll be using the tools provided by IBM to perform all the connectivity that is necessary to achieve this. Firstly, let me show you what we're trying to achieve. I'll fire up good old 5250 session and call my RPG program. Here we can see the top 10 news feeds from the BBC, where we can click on any of the feed links and it opens up that news in a browser. All very neat, just RPG with some embedded SQL and a display file. To get the links to open up in your browser, we have to have the hotspots enabled for our URL links. Let me show you where this is configured. Take Edit from the menu, then Preferences, then Hotspots. The first option is what we need enabled, the display URLs as hotspots. Just a word of warning, obviously my IBM I needs to talk to the BBC for this to work. Yes, it needs a route out of your network to access the internet. No, I'm not saying it has to be open to the outside world, it just needs a route or a gateway out to the outside world. To check if your server has this exit, a quick ping from the command line to the BBC will verify this. Looking at the BBC website, I found that they provide what is known as a feed. First question I hear, what is a feed? Feeds are generally known as RSS, really simple syndication, which are just web pages designed to be read by machines rather than people, which is exactly what our RPG is going to do. I'm going to use their feed for news in England. This can be changed if you want to different news topics, for example, technical feeds, politics feeds, etc. etc. Now we know the BBC provides a news feed and we have the URL for it, how do we use it? If we copy and paste the feed URL into a browser, the browser will format the output for us. We cannot see the definition of the return. But if we right click the output and press View Page Source, a new tab will open showing the format of the XML we need to use for our RPG program. That's better. Every item returns the news title, a description, the link, an ID and the publication date, just what we need. Our RPG program will only use the first 3 columns, so we can pick those out only. By using Run SQL scripts, we can tailor exactly what our RPG needs before we start any coding, always a good practice. Before we get stuck into RSS feeds, we need to take a step back and talk about DB2 HTTP Services. This is what our program is going to use to retrieve the feeds. IBM provides a library or schema called SYSTOOLS. This contains some great examples that we can utilize within our applications. They can make our developers' job much easier. The DB2 HTTP services have been available since 7.1, but don't seem widely used or known about. SYSTOOLS is a collection of DB2 supplied examples and tools. Be aware that the SYSTOOLS utilities are not covered by IBM service and support. If you are concerned with security, aren't we all, you will be pleased to know that these tools will use a secure channel HTTPS when specified. Before we move on to using the functions in SYSTOOLS, it is worth mentioning there are a couple of prereqs to using these HTTP functions. Because the HTTP functions use functionality provided by Java, a Java environment is created in the current job. This requires the following conditions. A Java virtual machine, a JVM, must not already exist in the job. The job CCS ID cannot be good old 65535, can be anything else. And PACE must be installed and operational. The check product option command can be used to verify that PACE is installed. We can easily see all the particulars for any of the SYSTOOLS functions using ACS, Access for Client Solutions. These details are held within the Schemas selection. Let me expand that. Let me take a look at the definition for the HTTPGETBLOB function, because that's what we're going to be used within our RPG program. We select that, right click on it so we can see the definition. We can see there it takes two parameters. Firstly, the URL of the newsfeed, which is a character input. Secondly, a HTTP header, which is optional, so we don't need to provide that. Taking a look at the return value, we can see it returns a blob, a binary large object. So let me use HTTPGETBLOB. Let me start off by opening up a run SQL script from ACS, Access for Client Solutions. Select SYSTOOLS.HTTPGETBLOB and the first parameter, the URL of our newsfeed, and a blank parameter as the second one. From IBM.sysdummy1 and Control R to run it. And we can see the results set down the bottom. Wow, that's not going to be much use to us. It's because that returns a large binary object and we cannot see what it is. So we need to convert it. If we go back to the XML that the BBC returned to us, we need to point our SQL to the sections we require. The first section is RSS, then channel, then item. The multiple item selections are what we need to pick up. As the result back from the HTTPGETBLOB is in binary, what we can do is use an XML SQL function that will convert this value into something more meaningful for our RPG program to work with. Let me paste the SQL statement into Run SQL. We will be using the XMLTABLE and XMLPARSE SQL functions to achieve this. Firstly, the XMLTABLE function, very powerful. It can analyse the XML returned from the BBC and return the desired portions, as in the individual news feeds. Next, we use the XMLPARSE function that converts the binary object we get back from HTTPGETBLOB function and convert it to XML. And here we can see the three columns we need. They are the news title, the description and the link. Let me run this SQL and see what we get. Spot on, a result. Now we are all ready to paste that SQL statement into our RPG program. That's the difficult bit done. And on to the source. Let me fire up the source in RDI, a bit easier to see than SEU for these old eyes. Let me say here the example uses the most simplest methods to display our news feeds. Firstly, the display file. Here we can see we have variable new1 for the news description and lin1 for the news link. And we have 10 lines for those. And that is it. Did say it was simple. And on to the RPG. Firstly, the H specs for us old uns. Then we declare our display file. Then we have a few standard constants and a few standalone definitions. I then set the SQL options, the equivalent of the RPG H spec. Then in a continuous do loop, I get the news feeds in a procedure and output the screen. So this is where all the work is being performed, in the get news procedure. So let's skip down to that. On line 291, I'm pasted in the SQL statement that I knew worked from my Run SQL scripts. On line 322, I prepare the SQL statement and check if there's no errors. Line 327 is declaring the cursor, again checking for errors. Line 334 opens the cursor. Then in a loop on line 337, get all the news feeds and put the SQL result set into a data structure called DSString. Then the next 50 odd lines populate the display files. And line 414 closes the cursor. And that's it. Job done, as they say. I put all the source for my RPG, display file and the SQL script in our GitHub repository. I'll put the link in the description of this video. And a top tip before I go. Every so often it's worth checking the contents of the SYSTOOLS library. IBM has some real gems in there. It's worth checking. Hopefully this video will give you a quick insight of how easily we can use HTTP services and include their functionality in our applications. They really are useful. If you need any further details about open source or IBM I, check out all our videos at learning.formaserve.co.uk and the articles we have written for Powerwire.eu. I hope you find them useful and let us know if there are any other topics you want us to cover. And that wraps up this quick video. Thank you for watching our How To on IBM I video set. I hope you found them useful. Keep checking our website learning.formaserve.co.uk and our YouTube channel. We regularly add new ones. Stay safe and see you soon.